What's up guys, Espen Jørstad here for GTO Wizard. Today we're going to be looking at another final table from the events tab. We're going to be looking at a 5k scoop final table from last year. It's a final table with a lot of familiar faces on it, a lot of strong, tough regulars, and a lot of tricky, aggressive hands being played out on this final table. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Alright, what's up guys? Espen Jørstad here for GTO Wizard. I didn't create a video for some time. Today I'm gonna do a hand history review of 5k scoop final table from last year. One of the events in the events tab at GTO Wizard. GTO Wizard has a bunch of new features now actually. They have a 3-way post-flop solver, which I think is something that most people are quite weak in. So my next video is probably going to be looking into that. They also have a bunch of new ICM things, which is really cool. Today we're going to be using the pre-flop sims from the events tab, and then we're going to do some AI post-flop solving for these final table solutions. It's a cool final table. We can have a quick look. It's this one right here. We have pads, we have bison, and not my style, I'm not so familiar with. Malaca, obviously one of the toughest Spanish regulars. Padilla, very known regular. Roman Rabeck, aka Gogak Sniper, also very tough, aggressive. Natrum, complete psychopath, aggressive player. And Ruders and PVGAR, also established regulars. So it's a tough final table, a pretty cool one. 127k for the win. First hand we're going to be looking at today is this one, where pads has a pretty tough decision, I think. So it goes open from U7 here. Padilla opens ace-10 off, completely standard open, of course. Natrum goes for a small 3-bet, basically clicks it with king-queen off here, which seems perfectly reasonable to me. Pads has pocket jacks in the small blind here, and I think it's a really tough spot. If you're up against value from either of these players, you're usually not doing great. I think Natrum could 3-bet stack off smaller pairs here for sure versus Padilla, like 8s, 9s, 10s, stuff like that, but he's probably not going to stack those off versus Pads if Pads goes for a 4-bet here. So this is a tough spot. Pads ended up folding after some tanking here. And Bison, I think, has a very easy fold with pocket 9s. Yeah, Padilla folds as well, which is perfectly fine. So let's have a quick look in GTO Wizard and see how pads did. Alright, so here we have the sim. As we can see, I went into the events tab, scoop, and we found this 5k Super Tuesday high roller. It's hand number 3 of the tournament. We can see here the stacks and all the players. I like this format a lot. It makes it very easy to study final tables. And it's easier to remember stuff as well when you have the player names, you have everything. You know, when it comes to like forming memories and like trying to remember strategies from simulations, if you have nicknames to attach some of the situations to, for me at least, it makes it a lot easier because I can relate to a lot of these players. I know them in real life. I've played with them, you know, so it's very easy to remember the spots better like this instead of just looking at random simulations. So for me, this is like an awesome tool. Anyways, let's have a look at the spot. It was U7, right? So low jack, U7, and then it was hijack. And first, let's have a look at the opening range. U7, ace-9 off is going to be the bottom here, and that's going to be the threshold. Pocket 8s, kind of interesting, like we're opening ace-9 off, but not pocket 7s. Of course, blocker effects matters a lot when you're this shallow with ICM. 3-betting range for hijack here, king-queen off is going to be pure. It doesn't print money, it's close, but yeah. King-queen off, ace-jack off, bottom offsuit, 3-bet bluffs. On to pads the spot here. You can see that pocket jacks actually, it's basically break even, and it's mixing in a little bit of 4-betting here. It's basically queens plus, but jacks is like super threshold hand. So actually, in-game, if it's this close in theory, I think it's probably fine to just 4-bet go with it, to be honest. This Natrum guy is a bit of a psychopath. So if he's going to be like way wider than the sim, then I think jacks is going to perform just perfectly fine. But Obviously not a bad idea just folding either. If you have a lot of aggressive players at the final table, like 3-bidding, 4-bidding, 5-bidding, playing like complete lunatics, not taking these super marginal spots is gonna net you some EB in the future, right? If they are more likely to bust each other. So there's that as well. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Next hand here is Roman Rabeck opening pocket 5s in U8. And PVgar is in the hijack with ace queen off. For me, this looks like a pretty slam dunk all-in, especially when you're playing versus Gogak, who is known to be quite aggressive. Does not hate putting money into the out this guy. So yeah, I think ace queen off here is just going to be a mandatory get in. I think Weissen has tough spot, because he's not just risking 20 versus PBGar, right? He's risking his tournament life 30 big blinds versus Gogak, and he has 12 big blinds here, 10 big blinds here, 20 here, and 20 here. I think 10s is going to be like a pretty mandatory fold here. I don't remember exactly what he did here, but I do remember the sim was a fold, and I do think that makes a lot of sense. Looking at this spot now, it does not seem like an appealing spot to gain. Okay, Gogak is loose, but he's opening from undergun 8, and there's a bunch of short stacks. I think you just have to let this one go. Okay, so he goes for it. They flip. Good luck. Okay, GG PVgar. Let's have a look at the solver. So we're going to hand number 5, which is the one we just looked at. And this was U8 hijack button. So U8, this is Gogak's range. You can see pocket 5s was bottom for him here, but I know him. He's not, he was not mixing. He's probably going quite a bit wider than this range. Hijack is ace queen off. Ace queen off, actually kind of whatever here between, actually EV wise, you could call as well. We can see here, it doesn't play a calling range at all, but the EV of calling is similar to raising or jamming. But we can see that it's kind of whatever between jamming and just 3-betting non-all-in. I actually wonder if you 3-bet non-all-in here, if we call the jam from the opener. I think that's going to be super close as well. Let's have a quick look at that before we move on. So we 3-bet hijack versus U8. U8 is jamming a range that looks like this. A lot of suited aces as expected. Bush pairs, king jack suited. Yeah, usual suspects basically. And versus this, okay. We are calling for the most part, like 95% call, but it's basically break-even call, which means it's going to be making quite a bit versus Gogak, I think. Because Gogak is not mixing these ones. Gogak is all in with these ones for sure, I think. Unless he has a specific reason not to be, which, yeah. So I think actually just 3-bet calling his queen off here is going to outperform this in quite a bit. Anyways, so he 3-bets. Here we don't have the half stack options. We're going to use the all-in option. And then we're going to look at the button range, which was the pocket 10s guy. And we can see even the pocket jacks is folding. Pocket 10s is losing half a big blind. Pocket jacks losing quite a bit as well. You need pocket queens or ace king here. So yeah, quite far off. Quite far off. And I think that makes sense. Like, look at this. You have 10 big blinds, you have 12, 20, 20. Not very appealing spot. So yeah, anyways, next hand. All right, next hand is this one. Another 3-way pre-flop all-in situation going on here. It's a lot of pre-flop stuff in this review. There is one very interesting post-flop hand as well, but a lot of pre-flop stuff. So we can see Malacca here opening ace-6 off into super short small blind and go back chip leading in the big blind. I don't think this is a good open, and I can say that now because I've seen the sim, but immediately when I looked at this, I was thinking this has to be too wide. Look at the stacks here. You have 11 big blinds here, you have 9 big blinds here, you have 20 there, and you're opening into massive chip leader. You have to be very tight playing here. It's also Gogak. He's a fighter. He's going to fight for pots. Trying to get like some steals in. You have an ace on the button, sure, but trying to like open somewhat wide into Gogak with a lot of chips is just not something you should be looking to do. So I think this open is a bit wide. Pocket 3s is going to be jamming here, which also is too wide, as we're going to see in the sim. It also does look too wide. And Malacca calls, which is also a bit too wide, I think. So every decision in this hand a bit too wide. Let's have a look at the sim. All right, it's hand number 7 of the tournament. We're looking at hand 3, 5, 7 to begin with. I promise it's not going to be 100 hands, this review. It's just happened to be a few of the first ones that were kind of interesting. So button opening range, you can see a6 off, kind of whatever. You can open or you can fold. It's neutral EV. The sim is a folding here. And versus Gogak, who's more aggressive than your usual big blind, and a small blind who is jamming wider than he should. As we can see, if we click here, we can see pocket trees, not supposed to be jamming. So if the small blind is jamming too wide and you have Gogak in the big blind who's going to fight for pots a lot, I think this ace-6 off on the button becomes quite losing quite fast. We can see what we're supposed to call versus this small blind jam, and we can see even ace-8 offsuit, which is kind of our bottom offsuit open on the button, ace folding. So yeah, ace-6 also going to be, you can argue the guy's shoving wider, he's shoving pocket trees, so maybe he's shoving some other stuff in here as well, you know, maybe he's shoving some of these, and maybe ace-6 off becomes fine. Maybe he's shoving every ace, you know, who knows. But yeah, in theory, a bit too wide from everyone this hand. So this is the most interesting hand of the review, I think. We're going to have a look at post-flop in this one as well. It's a very interesting pre-flop spot, first of all. Like, you're playing second chippy versus chippy. Small blind versus button here. You have a guy with 10 big blinds in the big blind. You have a guy with 20 big blinds over here. You have pads with like 28. So yeah, a lot of risk premium, obviously, playing out of position here versus the only guy covering you. I don't remember, honestly, pre-flop how this looks, but I'm pretty sure it's a call, and Natrum did call, which is kind of surprising to me. He's kind of out of line, this guy. And Gogak is kind of out of line as well, so I was kind of suspecting that this would just go like 3-bet, and then something, you know, like money goes in somehow. But no, they play a reasonable pot here. So he flats. Good job, I think. We're going to have a look at the sim in a second, but I think it's a good flat. And then he actually goes ahead and leads the flop, which I don't hate the idea. Like, thing is, you're crushing this board so hard. You're going to have so much equity because you're flatting so much stronger here in the small blind than what Gogak is opening on the button. The flip side of this is that you're playing out of position, very high SPR, very high risk premium, and the board is super connected, drawy, dicey. So there's a lot of bad turn cards for you. Trying to build a pot out of position with these factors doesn't seem great to me. I understand what he's thinking because obviously he's got a huge range advantage here. He crushes this board. But yeah, let's have a look in the solver and see what goes on. Here it just goes fold and yeah, next time. Anyways, let's check the sim. All right, so here we have the sim button opening range. First of all, we can see he's opening very, very wide. I think Gogak is going to be opening wider than this as well, potentially. But we see we have like Jack Deuce suited, 10-4 suited, 7-4 suited, mixing, Queen 7 off, King 4 off, stuff like this, you know, very wide. Small blind is going to be playing super polar, and funnily enough, he's playing a bunch of jams. A bunch of jams with hands that maybe you wouldn't suspect. Like these ones, I can get on board with. But these ones are pretty surprising to me. I would not be jamming 60 big blinds here, small blind versus button, with ace-7 offsuit. We can see the EBs, whatever, between everything, but yeah, that seems a bit outrageous to me. No pairs jamming, interestingly. It's just ace-king and then like a bunch of, yeah, weak aces as bluffs, basically. Queens, pure call, quite a big EB difference as well between call and 3-bet and jam. Yeah, kings, it gets a bit closer, but yeah. Queen's just going to call. We are going to have a look at post-flop here. Very convenient with GTO Wizard. You have the payouts already in here. You have the ranges in here. And you have automatic sizings. So very easy to have a look. All right, so Queen spade, 10-9 of hearts. Let's have a look. Okay, so you can see it's checking range. And the only sizing that comes in here is a massive one. Two things that's really interesting in this hand, I think, and that is that we can start by looking at the ranges. So we look at ranges here and we see our equity, we have advantage in everything. he has advantage in the trash, basically. Everything else, we have a huge advantage. We have 57% equity. We have more equity realization, even though we're out of position in risk premium. Let's have a look at the RP as well. The bubble factor, RP, whatever you want to call it. Massive. Small blind versus button, we have 21.5%. And button versus small blind, he also has quite a bit, 16.1. So pretty high for both players. Interesting thing is that once we check here, he's checking back. So in theory, this flop is supposed to just go check, check. Collusion, basically. No one is supposed to put money into the pot. And it makes sense for the small blind for the reasons that I mentioned. A high risk premium, high SPR, and dicey board, etc. You don't really want to build a pot. And it makes sense for the button as well because he's playing with such a weak range versus a pretty strong range. Interestingly, I went into here and I changed the bet size to see if it would put in some bets if I change it to something smaller. I think he used like 30%, 29, 30%. So let's check with that. And what happens here is threw me a little bit off at first because we see that he's now using a bunch of bets. So I was thinking, why does he want to put in a bunch of bets here now if that wasn't the optimal solution? And I did some EV comparisons, and basically what's happening is that if we look at the EV now, it's 1.46 playing with bets. The EV of the small one is 1.46 playing with bets. And if we play without bets, if we just remove it, like the previous one, so look, our EV goes up. So how can this be? Why do we use this bet size if our EV goes down? And the reason is that the EV of our opponent goes down more. And basically, it's an ICM concept, right? Where it can be possible for both of us to lose EV. Because what happens is that if me and him ends up playing a massive pot, the rest of the table is making money, right, with ICM. So it's basically like a solution where you're incentivized to collude, basically. And this sparked some interesting discussion between me and some friends where there is a lot of final tables where you are, in theory, supposed to collude, but playing some of this like collusion strats is going to look so bad that you might, I mean, in some places you might get disqualified, I don't know. But there is a lot of weird collusion stuff happening at final table sims, which, yeah, people are playing way too aggressive, basically. There's a lot of spots like this where you're kind of forced to cooperate to keep the pot small in high risk premium scenarios. This pot didn't go any further. They just ended it on the flop. But I thought it was really interesting to see that even though we do a bunch of betting with B30, if we add that as the forced option, it loses us EV. It just loses more EV for him. And yeah, it's a tricky concept. Tombos has a really good article on it, actually, that I was reading up on, where basically the solver says that you generally need to match your opponent's level of aggression. And when you give one player more bet sizes, you typically force the opponent to respond more aggressively in kind, which, yeah, these are direct quotes from Thomas's article. But go read that if you're interested in this topic. I think it's a really cool concept. And I think in the future, we're going to see more collusion stuff like this on FTs. And there's probably going to be some discussions around it. All right, next hand is another three-way preflop hand where Gogak has kind of a similar situation as Pads had before earlier in this replay, where it goes open and 3-bet before him and he has jacks in the small blind. Gogak goes for the more aggressive option, as he does. And yeah, Malaka has a pretty easy get-in, I think. They get it in and Malaka doubles up. Let's have a look at the solution. To me, it looks fairly close. All right, so here's the solution. It was hijack versus button versus small blind. So first, let's have a look at hijack opening range. Looks fairly standard, nothing crazy. Button 3-bet range, he's going to be inducing pocket 10s at some frequency, but basically jacks plus, and 3-bet bluffing a bunch of like weaker suited, one high card, one low card suited stuff. Small blind is going to be pure folding pocket jacks, It's losing quite a bit as well. I could see this making the cut in-game versus Malaka, maybe, because he's quite aggressive. Like, both of these guys are quite aggressive, right? So when ranges expand like that, I could see this one making the cut. But yeah, in theory, a bit too weak. Yeah, let's have a look at Malaka's response versus the 4-bet, just out of curiosity. Yeah, Queens is printing, but it is the cutoff, basically. All right, so next hand here is BVB Malaka versus Gogak. Malaka now overwhelming chit leader. He has 6-5 off here. Seems like very easy jam. Yeah, Malaka is very aggressive as well, so he's for sure jamming. Gogak seems to have a very, very tough decision. I can't actually remember what he did, but to me, this seems super close. I would probably lean towards calling. You have a 10 big blind stack here. You have 23 here. We're second shortest with 14. Yeah, to me, this looks like a call, but yeah, it's going to be super close, I think. Can't remember what Gogak did. Let's see. Hopefully he doesn't use his whole time bank to... Yeah. Okay, so he calls. And he is out. GG's. Yeah, to me it seems like a completely fair call. Let's have a look at the solver. So here we have the hand. And this is the small blind range. So yeah, very, very aggressive. We're playing 70% all in, 30% RFI, 3 big blinds, 0% limp, 0% fold. So as long as you're putting a decent amount of money into the pot, you're doing quite well. 6-5 off, printing, easy jam. So yeah, this is the big blind versus the jam. We can see that A7 off is the threshold. We're folding, we're losing a bit of money if we're calling A7 off. So I would have lost a bit of money here. Ace-8 off, making a little bit of money. So Ace-8 we call, A7 we fold. Don't blame Roman for calling though. As I said, I would have called as well. It's hard to argue that Malaka is very aggressive, so it's going to be wider than this, because it's really hard to be wider than this, honestly. Like, it's really tough to be wider than this. This is a really wide range. She's jamming Jack deuce offsuit. Yeah, but still. All right, this is the last hand of the review, and it's kind of a wild one, I think. So when I saw this, I was looking, and I thought, okay, it's insane risk premium spot. We're second in chips. We have 32 big blinds here. We have one guy with 18. We have one guy with 11. Malaka has infinite 85, 84. So we really don't want to bust here. We really don't want to bust this. And I was thinking, ace-9 off though, really strong hand. For sure, we're just calling, right? And the solver is surprising to me, at least. Maybe to some of you as well. We're going to look, but what Natrium did was even more surprising, I think, because he just rifled it in, which, yes, he understands correctly that Malaka is opening really, really wide here, and he's correct. But jamming here to win 5 and risk, I mean, it's not impossible for Malaka to have a hand, you know, like, yeah, this seemed very out of line to me. But let's have a quick look at the sim. All right, this is the sim. Let's have a look at Malaka's range first again. Kind of similar to the previous one, like almost the same. I mean, it's like 64% jam, and it's a big jam as well. 33 big blinds. He's open jamming small blind, 33 big blinds. And we can see his hand was actually an open jam, the hand he put into the RFI range. But of course, these are super hard to nail. It's kind of crazy sometimes how out of line you have to be. Even Malaka wasn't able to be out of line enough for this one. So he went for the 3.5 RFI, and we can see that his 9 off is just folding. Even ace 9 off is mostly folding. What? This is kind of crazy to me. Ace 8 suited, mixing folds. King jack off, queen jack off. This is a wild sim to me. Like, jamming is obviously torching. It's losing a lot. That's not so surprising. But that we're folding it is big surprise to me. Obviously, what's happening here is we can have a look at the RPs here. A big blind versus small blind, we have 23% RP basically. Huge, massive. And the thing is, like, when you're under that much RP, your opponent can put a lot of pressure on you post-flop as well. So yeah, you can call and see a flop with ace 9 off, but it's going to be really hard to get the showdown and win, because you're going to flop top pair sometimes and just going to have to call, fold, because RP is huge. And yeah, it's just really nasty. So but that's what's going on. But still, this one feels a bit, yeah, this one was surprising to me as well. Not as surprising as the jam, but still very surprising. Anyways, that was it for this review. As I said, GTO Wizard just came out with a bunch of new features. They have a 3-way post-flop solver, which I think is an area of the game where most people are really weak. Admittedly, including myself. I've done some multi-way work, but not nearly enough. And now it's going to be really easy to do that work. So that's probably going to be my next video for GTO Wizard, to do some analysis of multi-way spots, 3-way spots, and try to find some heuristics, try to see if we can make sense of it, you know. And thanks for watching, and see you for the next one. Bye.